Hey guys, today for UModeler X, we're going to dive into some new tools. We're going to take a look at the UV editor, its UI, and some unwrap tools. We'll cover parts of the UI to help you get familiar with the interface. We'll also go over some of the unwrap tools to get you started with UV editing. Let's take a look. All right, so to get started, we're going to use this cube here to help us demonstrate some of the uses of the UV editor and the unwrap tools. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is select my cube, go to faces, and I'm going to select all of these faces here on this game object. Next, on the right side, I'm going to select editor, and then I'm going to select UV editor. All right, and then what I'm going to do is go ahead and position this UV editor inside a tab here so I can switch between my scene and my editor easily. If you want to go full screen, you can double click on the tab and then double click on it again to go back and forth within your screen. All right, great. So within this editor here, you can have different sections that you'll use. At the very top, we have a toolbar. Underneath that, we have some settings. Within this space, this is our kind of our visual workspace for our UVs. And then on the right side is going to be the tools for our UVs. All right. So looking at my scene, I currently have all of these faces selected. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and do auto layout. What auto layout is ultimately doing is automatically taking all of the different faces and automatically laying them out, right? Just like the name suggests, auto layout. And so if you want to use this, this will be quick and easy, and that you'll technically be done with UV editing. But obviously, your models would probably be more complicated than a cube. And so let's take a look at some of the tools that will help us do that. At the top, we have a toolbar. This hand here is going to allow us to pan. This is our move tool. So this is your traditional move tool. There, if we were to take the rotation, this is going to allow you to rotate your face as needed. What you can do is also do scale. So if you have something selected, you can scale as well. You have this rectangle tool. So this rectangle tool allows you to kind of move it, but it also allows you to grab it and move based on different points that you have, right? And so anything that you select, you can move those like so. So very useful. All right, next to that, we have our vertex tool. And because we're still in the rotation or in the rectangle tool, so I'm going to go ahead and go back to move. And now I have the option to select this vertice like so. And so I can do this. And this is how you would kind of manipulate your verts as needed. Next to that, we have the edge tool. So we can go ahead and move edges as well. And we have the face, and we can move faces. One of the favorite tools here, very useful, is the island tool. Sometimes your scene can get super complicated and you just need to select and move a group of faces that are all one mesh. And so you can do that by selecting the island tool, and it will allow you to move all of those together. All right, underneath that, you're going to have your snap. So right now, as you notice, when I'm moving things around, it's kind of snapping in place. But if you want something a bit more smoother, you can do that by just literally turning off the snapping. And you can, of course, change your snapping based on what you need. And that's pretty smooth, but it's still snapping. And that's useful for accuracy purposes. But I'm going to, for now, go ahead and turn that off. You can change also your rotation snap as well. Now, if you want to show island boundaries, so this is pretty cool. You can actually show the boundaries of an island. Again, if you have an object that has multiple pieces, you'll be able to see different islands that you can select as well. And you can also show if you want your polygons filled or not for visual purposes. Moving over to the right side here, you have the show grid. You can turn your grid off and on as needed. You can show your axis off and on as well. And you can also have your texture. So as you can see, I wasn't in the one-to-one space, so I can actually move my object and put it within the space that's actually going to be needed. So there's your one-to-one space right there. And so you can show your texture that's applied currently to the object, right? And then below that, I don't use these pretty particularly, so I pretty much just leave this as default. But below that, you have the material. And so right now, this particular game object only has the UModeler X default gray material assigned to it. You can also have different materials assigned to your object, but in this case, we just have one. Great. So let me go ahead and turn off this texture so we can see more of our UVs here. Now, on the right side here, you have your actual tools, and these tools are going to give us the ability to kind of move and manipulate this object's UVs as needed, right? So starting at the top, we have our unwrap tools, and these are pretty much your basic tools. So what I'll do is go into my move, and then I'll just go into, say, my face here so I can kind of grab it this way. So now we have our plane. So I'm going to select all of these faces, and then I'm going to select plane. Below that, you're going to see tool properties, and you're going to have some options here. So now we have individual, projection, axes, view, normal, X, Y, and Z. And then you have a button to actually unwrap everything. So to really demonstrate this, what I'm going to do is move my view. I'm going to look at this game object from this particular direction, go back into my UV editor, and then I'm going to select unwrap. And as you can see, now this is unwrapped from the projection view of the actual view in our scene. Now, if I was to rotate this, say looking at like this and hit the same thing, view, well, let me make sure all those are selected, hit view, and then it's going to do it from that view, right? Now, if I were to say select individual and I select all those faces from that view, it's going to take all of those faces from that view and project them the way that you have it projected based on a view. So this here, for instance, is probably on the left side because you can, as you can see, it's projected from the view of the camera. Now, if we were to now look at normals, normals are different. Normals are going to point in different directions. So if we were to go down and select, let's say, this tool here where it says face normals, you can see this face with that little line here, right there, it's basically pointing out. So we can change the length of this line. And as you can see, I'm making it a little longer so you can see it. And so now that is the direction that that face is pointing. Now, if we select all of the faces, that's the direction all of these faces are pointing. They're basically the directions that they're looking. So now if we look at the UV editor and we select individual projection based on normal projection and hit unwrap, now we're going to unwrap all of those faces properly based on the normal view, which is really nice. So let's go back in my scene and I will go back and get out of there. All right, so now going back into our UV editor, and I'm going to select all of our faces again, go back to plane. Now let's look at our X view. If we select the X view and turn off individual, we're just going to get these based on the X view. It's not perfect because it's based on the X, so based on this direction. So if I select faces here, and I select this face, and this is on the X, more than likely it's going to be this one here. And then we have something on the side here because it's based on that direction. It's going to be on the side. So again, this is all based on projection. And this again works out pretty well, but if we do unwrap with the individual selected and we'll select everything and hit unwrap, it's going to give us the X view, but it's going to unwrap it individually like so. And that doesn't actually work for us properly, but if I select all and I do unwrap, again, it just all depends based on what you need and what you're trying to unwrap. So if we do that on the Y, it's going to give us a similar result because this is really just a cube at the end of the day. So, it just depends on what object you're using. Now, I prefer looking at it either using normal or using view. It just kind of depends on the circumstance. And this may not be that useful. Maybe this is more useful. whatever you need. Just understand that this is how the tool works, and then you use it based on what you need to unwrap. Now, taking this same face and now clicking on cube, and I'm going to turn off individual. Now I'm going to select unwrap. This is going to unwrap it based on a cube projection. So I'm not setting the projection. I'm not telling it. It's basically looking at all different sides and projecting it based on that. This is pretty handy, especially for a cube, but it can be handy for some game objects as well. So that one's actually pretty easy. Now, if we select auto layout is going to do a pretty good job of laying out this cube and projecting it the way that you need it. So again, for a cube, it's really easy, but we can take a look at more complicated models to kind of see how this would work. So we're going to do that. If you do unwrap, say select everything and we do unwrap, that's how that would work. Now, for instance, if we take our cube and let's do some modifications to this cube really quick, I'm going to extrude down on this cube a few different ways here and then go up, and then I'm gonna kind of go out like so. It's gonna kind of give us a nice little shape there. Another thing I could do is extrude inward and then go out like that. And so now we have like some particular shape, which is kind of interesting. So I'll just do this one and I'll leave it just like that. I think that's enough. So now we have a different shape, not just a cube. I'm gonna select all of these faces and let's go back into our UV editor and let's do cube again and then hit unwrap. And so now you can see that it said, okay, well, I'm going to project based on all the different sides, and then I'm going to break it up based on that cube projection. Now, if we want to do individuals, it's just going to break up all those different shapes, and that can be super useful. Great. So now if we select all of these shapes and now select auto layout, now it gets a little bit more complicated. It's trying its best to kind of lay out everything this way. This may not be the best way to go about it, but if you did like it and you did like the way everything kind of laid out, you can use a combination of editing your UVs, kind of moving some things around and going that route. That works okay. Now, if we do auto layout, yep, if we do the plane, if we went back to plane and did view, now it's going to give us that view just like we expected. Now, taking a look at the last one, this one is an algorithm. It's a LSCM algorithm. So what I'm going to do is have all these selected, and I'm just going to click this button. And right now, it's trying to understand what your intentions are with laying out this mesh. But what's important is actually you need to use mark seams to actually make this work the best. So if we go back into our scene here, and I'll go ahead and move this back here like so. And what I'm going to do is select my edge tool. Now it looks like there's some seams already marked. So what I'm going to do is clear any marked seams that are here. So what I'm going to do is click unmark here. And this is in our surface group. And so now there's no marked seams. So what I'm going to do is select certain seams. So for instance, say you're texture painting, saying something like Photoshop, and you know exactly what you're going to paint, but you need it from this position and you want to paint this way. So what we can do is actually mark seams this way, all the way around our mesh. And we're just going to keep going up, 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 there. And then as you can see, this is marked, I mean selected. I don't want that selected. I just want that side selected. And then let's just go ahead and see what that result gives us. So we're going to go back in here, and are these selected? I'm going to hit mark seam. When I hit mark seam, they're now marked there. So they're going to show in that color orange. Back into UV editor, what I'm going to do is select all of these faces, and then I'm going to select the LSCM. And as you can see, it unwrapped exactly what we needed for it to unwrap, but it kind of left everything else. So it basically said, oh, okay, so I'm going to unwrap this and lay it out the best way I can. But the rest of this, what I'm going to do is also lay it out. But because of the way it is, this is kind of your output. It's not terrible, just may not be what you expected. So what you can do is simply go in here. You can mark these seams as well. And we can just go around and select all of these just like so. And I'm going to go ahead and mark these seams. And so now we have those marked. Now the question is, what's going to happen to the center part? Well, we want it to unwrap properly. So what if I decided I want this piece and this piece all one piece? So what I can do is select here and select here and put a mark seam there. So there should be one there. Same thing here. Now this should be closed, so I'll go ahead and mark that one. So now this face part, I want this and all of this to be one. So let's go ahead and mark that. And I think that looks pretty good. Let's see how that all turns out. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and select all my faces, go back into my UV editor, and then I'm going to hit it again. And so now we have a better representation of our model. It's broken out the way that we wanted it to break out. And that's the power of using mark seams with this algorithm here. And this is probably one of my favorite tools here, uh, honestly. And as you can see, these are great because this is literally the other side of this one. Using the island, we could separate it, right? That's great. And we can kind of get these pieces, and now we can lay things out based on what we feel is more compact, and we can start doing that sort of thing. Cool. So what we're going to do is go back into our scene and I'll go ahead and delete this mesh, and we'll take a look at another object here. I have a little robot here that I modeled not too long ago. And we can use this as an example of what we kind of just learned of how we can use some of those unwrap tools. So what I'm going to do here, and just so you understand, this model was made with multiple objects. So for instance, if I were to have a cube and had this cube here, and I just duplicated this, and I'll move it over and bring it up a little bit and select both of these cubes. This is kind of how this model was kind of built. It's two objects, and then hitting combine actually makes this one mesh. So think of this arm and this shoulder as separate objects, but then combined into one. And so there's different ways you can go about modeling, obviously, but this was just a quick way to be able to build this little guy and to demonstrate a little bit of the UV tools. All right, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and select my robot here, and I'm gonna select all the faces, and let's go into the UV editor. So inside this UV editor, the first thing I would wanna do is go to plane, and I'm gonna go and click on view projection axis and hit unwrap. And so what that's going to do is kind of break out all the different pieces that I kind of mentioned. And now everything is kind of broken out and it's working out pretty good there. Let's go take a look at our robot and see how that actually plays out. So if I select edges, as you can see, I created some edges for this robot. As you can see, for the face, for this area here, to break it down, and for this area here. And so that's how you would kind of want you to use your edge tools or use your mark tools and be able to kind of determine what pieces do you want to kind of stay together. So if we look at our UV editor and we go inside here, I can actually, let me select my face. And so there's a face selected, so we can look for that. And so there's that piece right there. I'm gonna go ahead and select the island so I can get that whole face part. And so there's that face. So what I would want to do is right now it's projected at an angle. That's not necessarily how I want it to go. But if I were to do the LSCM That's going to project it properly for me, and I can just go ahead and rotate this guy the direction I want, and I can reduce the width. And so now that is just like so. Now I can do the same thing. I can now take this, and I believe this is part of the back. So that's that piece there. And so if I want, I can go ahead and hit that. And since it's already also got marked on it, marked seams, we can go ahead and reduce that and bring that down as well. Great. And so this is kind of one way you can kind of go about using the UV editing tools. It looks like this piece here is the part that kind of goes around that there. So it's kind of up to you how you mark your seams. This was just an example, but I can go ahead and take this and say, you know what, let me just go ahead and do this and kind of rotate this guy around and kind of move that in place there. And so there's another part of that head. Now we can continue to go and select all the different parts. So for this one, that's this whole part here. Obviously, this is probably not the best way to go about UVing it. So what we can do cube and see what happens there. Maybe we don't like that. You're like, no, I don't want to break it up like that. Maybe I can do auto layout. Auto layout's actually pretty good, but what happens is it's actually saying, hey, you're part of this mesh. So what we can do and go into the weld and break group, and you have an area called detach. So what detach is going to do is anything that's marked or selected, it's going to detach it from there. So now you can take it and manipulate it as needed. And again, I can use my scale tools to kind of bring this down and bring that over. Great. And so there you have that. And so that's pretty good. And so now we can kind of go in here and start saying, okay, I need to find this piece. There's that one. And so I can go and select that. There's that island. This piece here is even under there. So it's like the neck area. And so maybe we need that to be a separate color as well. So I can bring that and bring it up here. So for now, I'll just go ahead and do a auto layout. And because it's auto layout, it's going to find where it should connect to, but we don't want that. What I'll just go ahead and do is a detach on there and go ahead and put that wherever we need it. So we can just leave it there if you want, and we can just kind of continue with auto layout if you need to. And there you have it. And so we can continue to kind of build out our pieces and kind of get a very good understanding as to what makes up this head and lay all the pieces out just by using the mark seams with the algorithm tool, right? And so I think that we're not going to do this whole thing. It's going to take a little while, but it's just to kind of give you an understanding of how you could approach UV editing directly in Unity using UModeler. And it's great because it's part of the full workflow. There's a whole host of ways we can go about this, and there's a whole host of tools here that we can go over. But what I would challenge you to do is kind of use some of the basic tools, just maneuvering and messing with the vertex and the faces and moving vertexes and faces and using the mark seams tool to kind of see where you should mark your seams, because the whole goal of that is making sure that your seams are not in obvious places on your game model. You want to kind of hide your seams. It just really depends on your texture, and we can get into that in a more detailed video later on, but this is just a general understanding of looking at the tools that are here and using it within UModeler X, which is pretty dope, pretty amazing that you can just kind of do this right in Unity, and you don't even have to go to an outside 3D modeling application to do this, right? Not only are you modeling, but you're UVing too. And guess what? There's painting as well. We'll save that for another video, but for now, what are you guys doing with this? Use the UV editing. Let me see what you guys are working on. Would love to talk about it in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure to stay up to date with the latest features and updates by hitting the subscribe button and clicking the notification bell. More exciting content is coming, so you wouldn't want to miss out. See you soon.